So interpolation is a method of estimating a value of something at one location from values at other locations. And so this is something that we can do either in a vector or a raster environment, but I'll talk a little bit about how it's done, and then we can talk about how computers have the ability to do this in a really complex way. But let's say we're measuring something, let's say it's some kind of pollution. We go out into let's say Hilo Bay, and we notice that there's a certain pollutant level at one location that is 45 parts per million at this location. And then we go somewhere else and it's only 33 parts per million. And then another place it's 12 parts per million. And then over here we've got 31 parts per million at that point, right? And then over at this point we have 22 parts per million. So what interpolation does is it says, we know a little bit about these values at different locations. What we can do is use not just the number itself, but also its position with respect to the others to estimate the value in between, right? So we could say, well, for example, between 45 and 31, exactly halfway between those, we know that at that location right there, halfway between 31 and 45, we can add them together, take the average, but that's going to be, do some quick math. Difference is 14, halfway is 7, so 38 is going to be right in between, right? And we can, now, we've got a place where we know it's 38. Same thing between 33 and 45, it's going to be 39, right? So there's a value of 39 right there. And we can do this over and over again, and still we start to have a lot of information here just going from a few spots, right? So that's one form of interpolation. Another thing we can do is interpolate lines, right? And so we've seen this with these different isoline maps, these iso-Hyets and isobars, and then contour lines are done the same way. We know the elevation at a certain location, or the value at a certain location. We can say, well, between the 12 and the 22, we know that the 10 line is going to pass in between, or sorry, between 12 and 22, the 20 line is going to pass in between those. Which one is it going to be closer to? It's going to be closer to the 22, and quite a bit, because 20 is a lot closer to 22 than to 12, right? We also know that the 20 line is going to pass between 33 and 12. It's going to be also a little, or it's going to be pretty close to right in between those, maybe a little bit closer to the 12. So we know that line's going to go through there, right? So again, we can use as many values as we need to basically produce, in this case, a line. So you can imagine how this works in a vector environment involving points and lines. In a raster environment, what the computer can do is it can keep calculating and calculating and estimating so that it can basically, for every single grid cell, start to estimate what the value is going to be at that location, so that every single location has a value, okay? And so that's a way where we can go and convert something from a vector point data source, for example, or a line data source, and turn it into a very dense and sort of constantly varying raster data source that we can then use for all sorts of analyses.